Hello, everyone. This is the Inner Fix. My name is Tommy R, and I am an addict. I am so glad to be here. This is our first podcast. The Inner Fix is a podcast that talks about mental health, recovery, and addiction. And usually, before I start anything when it comes down to the situation, it's almost like, being in the rooms. I like to start off with the serenity prayer, and then we'll get the ball rolling. So, with that, can we just have a moment of silence for the still sick and suffering out there, followed by the serenity prayer? Thank you. God, grant me the serenity
and serenity
to accept the
to
things I
accept the
can't change,
things I cannot change,
the courage to change the things I
courage to change the
can,
things I can,
and the wisdom to
and
know
the
the
wisdom to
difference.
know the difference.
Okay. Well, before I begin, I'd like you guys to meet my team. We have Johnny F., we have Kim, and we're all here to share a message of hope. That is what the Inner Fix is about. Um, I'm going to tell you, for those who are just chiming on, there are going to be some raw and gritty stuff sometimes. We do curse here because that is the language of addiction and so forth. So if that will offend you, this may not be the channel for you. But like I said in the beginning, we talk about real addiction, we talk about recovery, and we also discuss mental health. And with that being said, I would like Johnny or Kim to introduce yourself, and then we'll get the ball rolling.
Hello, Hello, I'm an addict. My name is Kim.
And I am
Hey,
Johnny,
Kim.
also a recovering addict.
Great. Now that you know who we are, I like to get the ball rolling. First of all, to pretty much validate who we are and give you a small message of where we come from, how we got here. But before I start, I also want to admit that addiction could be a downer in life. It's an equal opportunity destroyer. It doesn't care if you're rich, it doesn't care if you're poor, it doesn't care if you're black, it doesn't care if you're white. It will destroy you as long as we allow it to destroy us. And we've been caught in the grips of addiction, usually due to a lie, trauma, or things that's happened in our lives. And the Inner Fix is here to share a message of hope that any addict can lose the desire to use and find a new way to live. And with that being said, we also have fun in recovery. So, a lot of people think that once you stop using drugs and you put the alcohol down, that gets boring, but that is not true. As you see here, as we do more and more episodes of the Inner Fix, that we're going to have fun. We're going to be laughter. Me personally, I'm a jokester, and I love to have a good time. I love to laugh. So, with that being said, my name is Tommy. I'm an addict. I'm going to share a little story about myself. I was brought up in addiction. I came from a very addictive family, very dysfunctional, very poor family. And I tell you, the only thing I saw was, drugs and alcohol from very young. I think I took my first drink when I was about 4 years old. And not because, I was a bad kid or anything like that, but, I'm a product of my environment and what I saw my parents doing. I was interested. I was curious, and so was my siblings. When they would get high and fucked up, they would leave their drugs and alcohol on the table. And I think I took my first drink, like I said, at 4, not knowing that it was alcohol. I thought it was Coca Cola. It was brown and it looks like Coca Cola, and I've had Coca Cola before at 4, and I know it made me feel good, so I drank it. Um, until I realized I was spinning around the room, and the next thing you know, my sibling and I, we were knocked out cold with the 2 X's on our eyes and coming out of our mouths. But yeah, with the dysfunction and so forth that was in my household, it was easy to gravitate to a life of kid just doing what he sees and not realizing that if it's good or bad, but just realizing that, hey, this is life. That's what I thought life was all about. And I thought life was about using drugs. I didn't realize that other people lived their life without it because that's all I saw. We grew that. I saw that with my aunts and uncles. Like I said, with my mom. My dad was, an alcoholic. And then there was mental health issues. My mom suffered from her own mental health where she tried to commit suicide and she failed. And I think that was like the beginning of my downfall. I didn't realize it was going to be the beginning at the time because I just thought, here it is, mom's gone now. She's in a hospital. And dad's already left the picture because he couldn't deal with her mental health. So I, was going with the flow with my siblings, and my aunt took over, the apartment that we were staying in. And, I thought she took over because she was going to try to replace mom and dad. But that wasn't the case. She actually took the place over because she had a place where she could bring her boyfriends and use drugs and so forth. And that was my introduction into child abuse because she was the worst. I mean, you're talking about letting us go hungry. We weren't clothed. We really bathed and so forth. And if we said anything or, even try to steal food or something like that just to eat, we got a whooping for it, and it was, I mean, really, really, really bad. I mean, it's not like just a spanking on. She tortured us. I remember one time we were hungry, and my aunt had fried some chicken or something like that inside the kitchen, and my brother and I, because we're starving, decided, when everybody was asleep, let's see if we can grab something to eat, and we actually scraped the crumbs of the fried chicken out of the frying pan, and we went in the refrigerator and I forgot what we took out of there to eat, but it was one of the worst mistakes that we ever made because when my aunt got up the next day, she saw the food was missing, and our punishment was that she made a big, huge pot of rice, no salt, no butter, nothing, and told us if we eat it, we're gonna get a whipping. If we don't eat it, we're gonna get a whipping. And my smart ass thought, hey, let me eat half, but that didn't work either. So, um, we got a whipping anyway. My grandmother got a hold of this and she said, "Oh no, I'm not going to have my younger daughter do this to these kids." At least that's what we thought. She moved us out of the house to her house, and instead of us, going into a better situation, she put us in the worst. She actually put us in the basement, unfinished, dirt on a mattress, and we stayed in the basement, not being able to even come up and enjoy her home. And she had a big house. It's just that we were my mother's kids, and my mother, because of her mental health, like I said, left a bad taste in all her siblings and her own mother. So we got treated like we were stepchildren, or um, kind of reminds me of the Cinderella story, except we were boys. Um, and there was no happy ending. It's just that we got treated really poorly. And then I guess about a week, my grandmother realized that she could not take care of us, and she decided to drop us over at our biological father, who is now with another woman living in a one room place, not even a full apartment, and with another child, and he didn't want to have nothing to do with us. It was like he was done with my mother, even though we were his sons. He didn't want to have nothing to do with us at all because anything that had to do with my mom, he wanted no part of. So good old Daddy-O, Father of the Year, decided to drop us off into a children's shelter, and from there, everything was pretty much downhill. That's where foster care came in, and foster home. My brother and I, we went through foster home, through foster home, through foster home, being moved from here, moved from there, and so forth. And through the grace of God, we were able to land into a good foster home. Uh, Mom was from Costa Rica, dad was from Jamaica, and these were professionals. Mom was an RN, dad was an engineer, uh, and I guess that's where I learned how to educate myself, and go to church, and learn that if I worked hard, I would accomplish things, and I give thanks to them because it's made me, well, it's been part of my story, and it's made me into a better man than because I saw something outside of the poverty. I saw something out of dysfunction. I saw love for the first time. Well, at the age of 13, my mom got out of the hospital, and the agency thought it was a great idea for us to, at least rekindle that relationship with our biological mom. And I was interested too, because I never really knew her. At 3 and 4, you have an idea, or you just don't remember after so many years have passed. And once I met my mom, now she's in a wheelchair. Now her speech is very, how can I say, slurred, where she's hard to understand, and the I guess I'm somewhat like an empath. That kind of touched me, and I felt like I needed to be there for my mom, and I started running away from the good home that I was able to live in, just to be with her because I thought I could help her, and not realizing that I was only 13. I couldn't even help myself, but you know, um, that's the life of a foster child. Sometimes is that when you don't know your biological parents, you want to kind of like rekindle that relationship, and you want to try to get to know them. And I ran away, and I ran away, and to the point where my foster parents, the good ones, said, what are we going to do? We cannot keep him here if he doesn't stay here. And I remember staying with my mom for about a week or so, and the agency intervened and said, "No, he's too young. He cannot stay with her." My mother was living in a 1 bedroom, and so there wasn't really space for me to really stay, or my brother to stay. And so we were pulled out of my biological mother's house, went back into the foster care system, moved out to Long Island, and I stayed with, um, I would say, a decent foster family. They didn't treat us like we were foster kids, but they weren't really as loving as the previous family. Anyway, I got into dancing and so forth, and breakdancing, and I was really good. And I went on tour, and I realized I can make a lot of money at 16 years old. I was doing $300 per show on the weekend. So, over the weekend I could make $600. But my foster parents, they didn't like that too much, especially when they knew that I wanted to go on tour. And of course, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, smart-ass Tommy felt like, well, if you're not going to let me dance, then I'm going to run away. And that's exactly what I did. I ran away back to good old mom, because I knew mom was going to accept me. Um, but that was pretty much the beginning of my addiction. And when I say that is because now I was of age. The agency said, okay, fine. We cannot really keep him in the agency anymore because he's of age. And then I was away for a couple of weeks, so they consider that AWOL. Um, and I had nowhere else to go. Now I was stuck in Far Rockaway, Queens, with my mom, uh, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was right dead smack into poverty again, right dead smack into dysfunction again. And I remember the first couple of nights, I realized I had made a mistake. I was crying, and I felt like, first of all, I'm in a place where I didn't fit in. When I lived with the good foster parents, I lived upstate New York, and it was a predominantly all white neighborhood. So, by the time I came down to the hood, I had no swag. I talked very proper. I didn't wear my pants hanging off my butt or anything like that. So, coming down into the city, into the hood, people would look at me differently. And it's bad enough that I used to feel inadequate up there. You know what I'm saying? Because, of course, at that time, I heard every racial slur there was. And not because people just were racist, it's that kids are mean. You know what I mean? They don't care. And if they can hurt you with a racial slur, that's exactly what they're going to do. Um, But now I'm in the hood, and I'm hearing the same shit from my own people who are telling me that I sound white or I'm gay or something. I don't know how they correlate, but yeah, they figured I didn't fit in. And what I think I was longing for love and longing for acceptance, and I realized that if I got high with these guys and so forth, and maybe they would accept me, and that's exactly what happened. Once I started smoking weed and hanging out with, I don't want to say the wrong crowd at the time because I really didn't hang out with the wrong crowd, but there was that love, there was that acceptance. They realized that even though I might have sounded corny or I might have sounded, articulate or whatever, that I was a pretty cool guy. And that was okay with me because now I felt like I was part of something. I was part of the in crowd and so forth. But as time progressed, I realized that my addiction started to progress, and weed led to cocaine, led to mescaline, it led to lots of alcohol. Started with 40s, but then of course you would get into some other stuff too, and this carried on for like I would say into my early 20s, and I realized that life was getting a little complicated because I tried to keep a job, couldn't keep a job. I tried to move out, never had enough money to actually move out, or maybe I did, but it was like when I got paid, um, if I was even able to have money the following day, I was lucky because usually that money went into partying. So I was never able to do the things that I thought I could do. Was my life unmanageable? I didn't think so at the time because I thought that's what everybody did from young, partying, right? But it got to the point where I realized that I needed some type of change because I was losing the values of my good foster parents. And I realized that, I kept on doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's when I found treatment. And I remember going in there for 28 days. And it was new to me. It was like I got a good washing and a good cleaning. I got my strength, back up. I started looking good. And when I came out, um, I thought I was cured. I thought I completed the program. I graduated addiction. You know what I'm saying? But I had no program at all. And I and what nine in not even less than 60 days, I was out using it again. Because you know why? I went back to people, places, and things. And I guess it's because it was easier for me and I didn't know about, moving somewhere else or getting out the situation. And then, of course, I was young and I couldn't really fathom the idea of not ever partying again. 20 something years old, everybody gets high, barbecues, weddings. Even if you're working and the office might even have a party, everybody's drinking. So how am I not going to party? And I continued the same thing over and over and over again for the next, I would say, probably 7, 8 years until I was working for a law firm, and like I said, every weekend as an addict, I get paid. Um, I was that guy that if I came in on Monday or Tuesday, you're lucky because my money went into drugs. You know what I mean? And my boss, I guess he kind of figured out something was going on, and he gave me an ultimatum. He said either get yourself into treatment or you lose your job. And I didn't want to lose my job at the time. I was living with this young lady, and rent was my responsibility too. So I knew I needed my job. So I went and got treatment. And, I tell you, I thought, they said, I thought it was going to be another 28 days. And when they told me, no, you too fucked up. It's going to be like 6 months. I was like, oh shit, this is a jail sentence. And, but what's so funny is that I said to myself, if I could do 6 months clean, I probably could do the rest of my life. But 6 months, it wasn't 6 months. It actually turned out to be 11 months. And that was even better for me because now I was really clean. again, I really didn't adapt to NA or AA. I didn't really, I guess I wasn't really feeling that. Um, and when I came out, because I was so used to going to church, I used church as a way of staying clean. And I did that for 11 years. And in that 11 years, a lot of good things started happening. That's when they say, you know, when you get clean, if you have some type of positive aspect on life, things can change. I got back into church. I got married. I started a business. I didn't actually buy a house. I had a house built because when I started my business, I started making a shitload of money, more money than I ever made in my life. And things were going really good for me until life started getting lifey and things didn't go good. And I remember now the marriage I thought I was going to hold on to for the rest of my life started crumbling. The church wasn't doing church things. And it killed me. It hurt me deeply because, and then, I felt like God let me down. You know what I mean? I mean, here it is. I'm being a good father. I'm being a good husband. What's with the fucking divorce shit? How could God do this to me? You know what I mean? And so now I'm full of pain. And what do us addicts do? We go to our first number one pain reliever, and that's drugs and alcohol. And because I didn't have a program, I went back out for another 14 years. And now I have money to kill myself, money to destroy everything. It's a slow process building yourself up, but when it's time to fall, oh my God, you fall fast. And that's pretty much what I did. Fortunately, I didn't lose my business. I still have it till today. But my life crumbled. I was living in darkness. I was living in a lot of pain. And when I went into recovery again, I walked in with 3D: desperation, despair, and a shitload of depression. And I realized that something had to give. So I found a place in New Jersey, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I had made a commitment to say, listen, man, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm going to listen to these people because Cocky Tommy, you know, um, now that I have a business and so forth, can be very sarcastic, very think I'm better. And I realized that I had to humble myself. So I said, you know what? I'm going to listen to everything these people do. I'm going to take the cotton out of my ears and stick it in my mouth. Shut up and listen. And that's exactly what I did. And I poured myself into recovery. I mean, I dived in. I was all in. I was locked in. I did all the 9 suggestions. I moved away from people, places, and things. I got a sponsor. I got a home group. I started doing service, and that's what I do today. That's what we're all doing right now here is service, because we don't get paid for this. But yeah, I made recovery part of my life. And I never, ever forget that day, um, right before I came in, how I felt. And I keep that in front of me at all times. And that's what recovery has done for me. It's given me a better life. It made me reconnect with God. But before I reconnected with God, I used the rooms as being my God, because, like I said, I wasn't too happy with God at the time, the divorce and so forth like that. But my God was a group of drug addicts, just like me, who understood me, who listened to me. They were like me. I could have conversations with them. And when I couldn't stand on my own, sometimes I knew I could pick up the phone and call anyone, and they would be right there to help me and guide me along the way or take me to a meeting. So I am very grateful today. I'm grateful for being here and starting the Inner Fix, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help those who cannot help themselves. We're here to love those who can't love themselves. My name is Tommy. I'm an addict. All right, guys, that's my story.
Thanks, Tommy, for your share. That was really inspirational, honestly. Again, I'm an addict. My problem is Kim. Um, so I grew up in a small town called Greenwood Lake. It's about 45 minutes outside of New York City. Um, I lived it. I always was shy and uncomfortable in my own skin, so didn't really feel like I fit in. I remember in like sixth grade, probably, I was bullied a lot, and nobody really liked me. And then in seventh grade, um, my it's kind of confusing, but my godmother's sort of stepdaughter moved to Greenwood Lake because she got taken from her parents because they were unfit. And so immediately I connected with her and we became best friends. We still are today. And then also I have an older brother. He's like a year and a half older than me. He started to get popular, and then we all started hanging out with the same crowd. So around 13, I started drinking and smoking pot. I remember there was this girl in my class who had lost her leg due to gangrene, so she was on morphine, and we used to get her pills from her and snort them. That was at 13. Um, and doing drinking and doing drugs is when I really felt like I fit in. I was able, I wasn't so anxious all the time. I was able to, be sociable, and um, I realized that I just really, like, that was the answer to all my problems. That was that changed everything for me. When I was 15, I started taking ecstasy, and then I really loved it, so I kept doing it. I did a lot of it around that age. That was like my drug of choice for a while. And then when I was 16, somebody gave me a Vicodin, and I'll never forget the first time I felt the effect of that. We were out shopping, and it just hit me, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is what I've been looking for my whole life." And I remember I didn't think I was an addict, but I can remember, like, one 4th of July, I kept saying, like, "We need to find drugs, we need to find drugs. I want anything except for crack or heroin," because in my mind, the people who crack and heroin were the ones that people got addicted to and became addicts, and because I wasn't doing those, I wasn't an addict. But with the pills, they're highly addictive. So after like 2 weeks, um, I we couldn't find any or whatever, and that was the first time that I got sick, and it scared the hell out of me, because I realized that I was actually addicted to something, and that I was having withdrawals, and I was ashamed of it, so I didn't ask for help. I just suffered in silence, and for the next couple of years, I just would, you know, I would just find ways to get money to get just to get as many pills as I could get my hands on. That was all I cared about. Um, then one of my friends went to rehab for she was addicted to heroin. So when she got out, she introduced me to Suboxone, and I remember the first time I took Suboxone, and the withdrawal symptoms went away, and I felt like a normal person for the first time in a long time. And I was like, "Oh my god, I like now I need this in my life, for when I can't find stuff because shit's getting expensive and it's getting harder to find." That's when like the laws started coming out about opiates and stuff. So I, I after a while of buying them off of her, she would tell me like one every couple of days, and I would just, I remember I would try not to take it because once you took it, you couldn't take anything else for 24 hours. So I would have one and I'd be sitting there suffering, but convinced that I was going to find more that day. So I wouldn't take the Suboxone. I'd be sick until I figured out that I couldn't get anything else for that day. And then finally I would give in and take it. Then a friend of mine, she had been going to a cash doctor to get Suboxone, so she took me with her. And it was like an hour ride from where I lived, and I would have to go once a month. and it was walk-ins. So I would end up sitting there all day. The room would be packed, for so many people were going there. And I would spend like it would take up an entire day. I would have to just plan the whole day of being there. And, I would get them. And then when I got home, I would immediately start trying to sell them to get money to get more pills. Um, but I would also take them. And then I got a job working for the Department of Corrections when I was 19. It was 3 days before my 20th birthday, actually. I started working for New York State. And um, I met an officer there and started dating him. We had been dating for about a year. And we got notice that they were closing the prison that we worked at. And the officer that I was dating was from the Western New York area. So he wanted to get closer to home. And because of the jail closing, he had priority. So we knew he was going to get to his home jail. So I decided to go with him. And I had one of the um, deputies, superintendents, set it up so that I could go with him. She got me a job out here. And we moved out here in like 2011, I think it was. And I because I moved, I could no longer access that Suboxone doctor. And um, when I had started dating him, actually, I stopped trying to get the pills, and I just was staying on the Suboxone. So I was on the Suboxone for quite a while. And then I had to just give it up cold turkey because I didn't have a doctor out here. And I thought, oh, it'll be a week of suffering. I had a week off in between the two jobs. Um, and I thought I'd be fine after that. Well, it's not like that with Suboxone. That's a really hard one to get over. And I remember like 4 days in, and I was like suffering, and my and the guy that I was living with, his old roommate, was like, "Here, you can have some Percocet," and I was like, "No, I made it this far. I don't want to do that because then I have to start all over." And I kept waiting to get better, but every morning I would wake up with that anxiety and just miserable, and it took months to feel normal again. Once I finally started feeling normal again, I met a girl who was addicted to pills, so she was always getting them. So after 8 months of being clean, not doing any program, just suffering in silence, basically, I started to do pills again. And I ended up marrying the officer. And it was weird because the way we got married was, it was just like it was Thanksgiving weekend coming up, and both of our families were going to be in town. And we just said, let's just do it this weekend. We were thinking more about like insurance purposes and stuff. And just because our families were going to be there, and we just did it on a whim, and we ended up getting married that weekend at our house. And my ex-husband's mom was ordained, so she married us. And my dad was able to walk me down the aisle. And then a month after we were married, I got pregnant. And I'm ashamed to say this, but I didn't stop taking the pills. I convinced myself that doctors give pregnant women painkillers, so it's okay to do. Um, so I continued to do that because I was addicted and I didn't want to suffer. Um, and then when I was about 4 months pregnant, my dad went in for knee surgery, and I was I was too busy like out getting pills that day, and you know just being taking them and being high. And I said I'll call my dad tomorrow. So the next day, when I finally called my dad, nobody answered. I couldn't get a hold of anybody. And then my sister called me and told me that our dad had died. Um, so then um, that was really hard. I carry that regret with me over not calling him the day before to talk to him. Um, And also, the reason he pushed for that knee surgery then was because he wanted to come out to my house for the 4th of July weekend. And he wanted to be able to walk when he came there. So that's why he pushed to have that surgery when he did. And it was too much for his body to handle because he had had his other knee surgery, however many months before. Um, so that's just something I carried with me. And of course, I was high when it happened, and I never really grieved. Um, then when my son was born, they did drug test me and him, and they found the drugs in my system, but by the grace of God, there was nothing in his system. I don't know how that's possible, other than the grace of God, really. Um, so then, I was on and off with the pills for a while. Then I got hooked on Adderall, and that was kind of scarce. It was hard to get, so my one friend kept telling me that she could get something else that was like Adderall, and I kept saying, "No, I don't want to do it." And then finally one day I gave in and said, "All right." And it was meth, and I started doing meth with her, and then I got hooked on that. I was on that for about 6 years. Then my ex-husband, right around the time of COVID, we had gotten into a big blowout, and he kicked me out of the house. And so he told me to get out, but then he like put my truck up on a jack so that I couldn't drive away, and he took my cell phone away and took the house phone off the hook, and like wouldn't let me leave. But then so then we were in this huge fight, and then yeah, obviously I stayed at the house. He put my truck back down, and the next day he took my keys with him to work so that I couldn't go anywhere. And then the day after, he went to work, and I packed my truck the whole day because he didn't want me to take our son with me, and I wasn't leaving without my son. So um, and he had two other sons from a previous girlfriend. Um, s- um, so anyway, I packed my truck that day, and I waited till like the right before he was about to be home because I didn't want to leave my stepkids alone. They were old enough; they were like, I don't know, 14 or something. But I didn't want to leave them alone all day, so I waited till right before he was going to come home, and I left with my son, and we went downstate to my mom's. And because it was COVID, I was able to work from home. Then because um, down at my mom's, I couldn't get the meth anymore, so I stopped doing that, and I switched back to painkillers, um, and Adderall. And then, um, after like 2 months, I had to get back to Western New York to return to work. And it just worked out that like one day this lady called and said she knew of an apartment available, and I happened to be driving out to Western New York. Just I had didn't really have a plan. I just was driving out here because I wanted to get more drugs. And um, on the way, I got the call about the apartment. So I called the lady, and the next day met her at the apartment, and she said, "It's yours if you want it." And it's 4 minutes from my job and 4 minutes from my son's school. So I took it, and um, then I started doing the meth again because I came back. And um, then I started dating this guy who was taking methadone recreationally. So I started taking methadone recreationally. I got hooked on that. And so I was doing, meth to get up and methadone to bring me back down. And it was just a vicious cycle. And I remember just hiding in my bathroom like all the time, just crying on the bathroom floor, miserable. Like I just wanted to die, but I didn't want to kill myself because of my son. But then I was resenting my son for giving me a reason to live. And I was just so miserable. I remember just every day being like, why can't I get hit by a bus or something, like, or overdose, or why can't this just be over already? And then that gift of desperation, it really was a gift, because there was a series of events that happened where I got in trouble at work, for being late 4 times in 2 weeks, and not just a little late. Like I was supposed to be there at 8 and showed up at like 11. And It was getting bad, and I was falling asleep at my desk all the time. And so my boss called me in, and I told him it was because of I didn't get along with the people at work. And he told me maybe I should, go see a therapist. So I used that as my excuse. I told him the following week that the therapist suggested I go to a behavioral health place for a couple weeks and just get away from everything. But really, that was my plan, to go to rehab, and I went to a place called Recovery Centers of America. I was there for 29 days, and right before I was about to leave, I was terrified because I knew that I wasn't ready. I knew I was going to go back to it if I went home. So they set me up with a place in New Jersey called North Jersey Recovery Center. That's where I met Tommy, and through the alumni place, I met Johnny, and that place saved my life. They helped me. The guy that I was dating was also, he was a narcissist. He would he would stalk me. Like, he changed his number 22 times because I kept blocking him, trying to get away from him. And he was like just emotionally abusive. And um, he would just pick a fight with me so that he could go hang out with another girl, and and then just show up and act like nothing happened. And like, I just felt like I couldn't get away from him. So when I was at NJRC, they helped me get a restraining order, and um, they really saved me from that situation. Um, then, from there, they took us to meetings, so I was introduced to AA and NA. And although I'm an addict, I do go to AA just because mainly because I like the big book better than the basic text. That's like the main reason. But it's really helped me. I got a sponsor. I've done the steps. I have a home group, and I've started sponsoring the other people, and it's really changed my life drastically. And I find myself more at peace, and doing service work really has been um, super, super inspirational and helpful. And that's really the main thing that's kept me clean up to this day, is, helping others. And just any service work I could do, I'm grateful for. They say that, when you're really struggling, the best thing to do is talk to another addict, um, or help another addict, and that really, really does help. Um, so that is my story. Thank you so much for letting me share it, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Kim. Oh my God, such an amazing story. I've heard you say it before, and it's always a pleasure, just listening through your struggle and to be able to come out on top and still be clean, even through all types of diversity. So thank you for letting me share. Okay, Johnny. Oh, not you share. I mean, you share. Okay, whatever. Anyway, I guess I'm still, well, I've always been at it. Anyway, Johnny, you're up next. You want to tell us about your story?
Yeah. Uh, Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Kim, for your share. As I've said before, truly inspirational. Um, but yeah, so my name's Johnny. I'm an addict, 42 years old, and I'm no stranger to addiction, recovery, and then addiction again, and that vicious cycle. From as far back as I can remember, I was always that kid that loved adrenaline. I loved the thrill of getting caught when I wasn't supposed to be doing something. I wasn't like by any means a troubled kid, but I didn't like to follow rules even as a young kid. Um, a lot of things came very easy to me. I was always incredibly intelligent. I was very good at sports. And when I was young, that was great, because I could play any sport, I fit in anywhere. But at the same time, I didn't know where I really know it. Looking back now, I didn't know where I really wanted to fit in. I was also a weird kid because even though I played sports and, this where I'm from, the school I went to, they had like your three basic sports or you were a nerd. You were like that geek. Um, but I did like the nerdy things too. Like, a lot of my friends grew up watching like The Simpsons and weird cartoons, and I grew up watching like ER, Life in the ER, trauma stories, and I would read like I at 6, 7 years old, I knew most of the human bones in the body. Like my brain was weird, and I loved that stuff. But then in school, I didn't want to be that guy because all my friends were jocks, and I didn't want to be labeled a nerd. So I was always back and forth. My grandparents, on my mom's side, they basically were primary caretakers. My mom and dad both worked 2 jobs when we were young. They were hustlers. My mom's side of the family, I don't know anybody in that family that at some point in their life or still now is not addicted to some kind of substance or has some kind of mental health issue. My dad's side of the family, there were some drinkers, but never to that extent where life became unmanageable. My dad himself, he partied when he was younger, but when he met my mom and she got pregnant with me, he stopped all that stuff. He became a responsible father to be, a responsible man. But on his side of the family, there's a lot of illness. So, fast forwarding a little bit, when I was 13, my dad's best friend, who was also my best friend's father, suddenly passed away. That was like the first real, I guess you could say, trauma for me because even though he was my best friend's father, he was a big part of my life. He taught me a lot. Used to in the summertime, he was a phys ed teacher and athletic director at the school we went to, and in the summertime, he used to take my sister, who was also best friends with his daughter, and myself and his 2 kids. We used to go up to our high school and we would work out and play basketball like every day. He would take us, so we were always busy doing something. And so when he passed away, it left a pretty big void for my family. And then seeing my best friend go through what he was going through, um that was tough. And then a year later, my father was diagnosed with cancer. So it was like one after the other. He couldn't be the coach of my baseball team anymore. So that was like my first resentment. How's this great guy? There's a God, and God loves everybody, but you got this great man who coached all kinds of kids. Even at his wake, there was kids lined up for hours, to come honor my father because of what he did for them. He was a big on, basically, he gave the underdog the fair shot. Where I was from, it was very political, small town. Well, not really small town, but political. Everybody knew everybody, and sometimes those kids that knew everybody or had a big name, they got to play the sports, and then the kids that were trouble, air quotes, even though they might have been a better talent, they didn't get that opportunity. My dad didn't like that, so when he put his team together, he gave those kids the opportunity that they never got through the school. That's just the type of man he was. But needless to say, he couldn't coach anymore. He battled cancer from I was 13 when he got diagnosed. He passed away when I was 25. On and off, he never had a normal life after the first time. He ended up getting a lung removed. He ended up getting COPD from it. He had to sleep sitting up. Quality of life was terrible, but never complained. Never took a pain med. Never. I mean, he missed 2 weeks of work after he got his lung removed. Just that old school generation. No woe is me. No feeling sorry for himself. No pity party. Um, but on the other side of it, my mom was an alcoholic and a pillhead for time I can remember. Being, looking back at it, when like Tommy, like you were saying, when you're 3 or 4, you don't really know, but you know. But we didn't know what to call it. It's just something's not right with mom. As I got older, we realized something was wrong. She was a registered nurse and she was assistant director of a nursing home, and her job was to destroy narcotics. And back in the day, before they had all the controls they have now, how she destroyed narcotics was she bought them home and took the narcotics. And she used to hide them under the mattress in her bed. And that's when I was in my late teens. That's how I developed my pill habit. But my first my first smoking weed, I was 13 years old. Experimental. I had older cousins who smoked, and they always looked like they were having fun and laughing. So of course, when it was around, I smoked too. Um, I messed around with mushrooms and acid in my late teens and stuff like that. But when I was 17, I took my first pain pill. And I think my mom was so caught up in her addiction and my dad being sick, and addiction has this evil way with codependency. And even at a young age, my mom was codependent on me and I was codependent on her with our relationship because she was hiding the pills from my dad, even though I knew she had them. So once I told her I think I had a headache, and she gave me like a Percocet for a headache. Just who knows why? She still can't answer that question to this day. It was there. Yeah, you could look back and say, oh, she wanted me to suffer like she did. She knew what she was doing, but I don't think there was no ill will towards it. That's what she knew. It worked for her, so she thought it worked for me. And like Kim had said, that I can still to this day remember my parents had this waterbed, and I remember taking it and laying on the waterbed, and I remember that feeling of sinking, like floating, like I was weightless, and it was the best feeling in the world. So I dabbled with that here and there. Then I caught a pretty serious charge. I got caught with a bunch of pills in a prescription bottle with someone else's name. I ended up getting charged with a Class D felony. I got 3 years probation, and I turned that 3 years probation into like 18 years of probation because I could never complete because I always gave dirty urines. Some things had transpired as I got older. Like I said, my mom's whole family was so messed up on drugs. My mom's brother was a crackhead and an alcoholic. My mom's sister, she was a pillhead. Still, to this day, she still struggles with that. But there was never any ownership, so I never learned the right way to deal with anything. It was always, well, this one doesn't like this one, and this one got a raw deal, and our we don't have a lot of money on my mom's side, so it was never anything that we were doing. It was always somebody else's reason, somebody else's issue, and that's how they coped. And I think the biggest point looking back is I don't think I'm an addict because my mom was an addict and my aunt and her family. I think I became an addict because once it was introduced, I learned behaviors at a young age that allowed me to become a drug addict. The behaviors, the coping, how they dealt with everything. My dad was also old school in the fact that, you didn't go see a therapist. Therapy happened inside the house, and that was usually an ass whooping. That's how my dad was. He was hands on. He was a great man, but he was very strict disciplinarian when he could be. He didn't like when we shared what was going on inside our house, outside of our house. You didn't cry. You didn't, what was me? Again, we're talking about a man who had lung cancer for 13 years. So it was hard for me to argue with that. So I never learned how to process emotions correctly. I never learned how to deal with trauma. I never thought I was allowed to talk to anybody. I felt like if I spoke about what was going on, I was weak. So I used drugs. I used drugs and alcohol. I stopped playing baseball. Like I said, I was incredibly smart, but I was bored in school because I didn't want to be there. So I always got in trouble. I mean, I didn't graduate high school like normal people did. I walked across the stage, but I had to go to summer school to get my diploma not because of my grades, but because I missed like 101 out of 160 days of school my senior year because I was suspended or just didn't want to go to class. And I thought I knew everything because I was so intelligent. Fast forward early 20s. After that charge, I was forced into rehab. That was an alternative they gave me to jail and with the probation. I went because the court told me to go. 28-day program. I'm not an addict. Like Kim had mentioned, I wasn't doing heroin or crack or, I wasn't living homeless under a bridge eating food out of a garbage can. I had nice clothes. I was working at the time. I had good parents. I had a nice home. So a drug addict? What? You're crazy. I wasn't my uncle. I saw a drug addict. I grew up with drug addicts. I know what a drug addict is. So I did that, like Tommy had said, kind of like an oil change, just go in there, honor the courts, completed the program. About 2.5 years into my first 3-year probation, I got a dirty urine for, I don't even know what it was. I think it was alcohol. So I had to go into an outpatient. And then in the outpatient, I would have random drug test that would come back dirty and I always had an excuse for, oh, well, I was drinking apple cider and I didn't know there was alcohol in it. Like stupid, like, and the therapist will be like, yeah, okay, sure, John, again. So, and that was that vicious cycle, back and forth, numerous detoxes, numerous rehabs. I did put some clean time together, and then I would relapse because, as stated before with Tommy and Kim, I never worked on me. I thought drugs was the issue, and they were, but they were more of a solution to my issues. I never actually worked on why I needed to use drugs or alcohol in the first place. So I think I was 25 years old, and I was trying to come off pain pills and coke and a couple other recreational things cold turkey, because nobody knew I was using again, and I didn't want to have to tell anybody that I had to go to rehab again. So I was doing it at home, and I had about 4 or 5 days clean. And one night, on a Friday night, my father just dropped dead, like basically in my arms. I had to do CPR on him with my mom. And, that was, I think that night I called my cousin, and I knew he had pills, and we got ripped that night. And that was the perfect excuse I needed to go on another run. I left my dad's wake. My mom and my sister were there. I left my dad's wake to go get drugs. Left them both standing with the casket. I was completely numb through his whole service. And I can remember I didn't even cry. Like, I don't want to say that I didn't miss him or I didn't know what was going on, but I was so numb. I didn't even process it. 6 months later, I got a DWI, and had drugs on me. So I got arrested again, and I was court ordered to a little bit longer term inpatient rehab. I went to St. Christopher's Inn. This was in 2010. And I did actually it was like 110 days, and then I had to do outpatient when I came home. And I was good. I was good for almost a year. And then almost a year to the day, it was a year and a month to the day that my dad died. My younger cousin, my mom's sister's son, he overdosed and he passed away. But the difference this time is because I was sober. I remember I bawled my eyes out for that. I felt everything. And I remember people being like, dude, you didn't even shed a tear when your dad died, but your cousin passes away. And, looking back on it now, it was because I was dealing with emotions. I was actually feeling it. I didn't feel it when my dad died. About 2 weeks after that, I picked up. Couldn't tell you why. I mean, I could speculate why. It's because I wasn't doing a program. I stopped working on myself. I stopped calling people. I stopped asking for help. Figured I got over a year clean now. I know that if I take them every day, I'm going to get hooked on them, and I won't get hooked on them this time, so it won't be an issue. Yeah, that didn't last too long. Did another rehab, and then started dating, got clean again, and I started dating who's my wife now. I've known her since I was 14. She was friends with my older cousins. I started dating her, moved in with her. Everything was great. And then we moved to Poughkeepsie, New York. We had an apartment together. And one day, an old friend I used to party with, he moved out to the city, and he was in the area, and he called me up, and he was like, hey, I just picked this stuff up, bro. We haven't children so long. Let me come by. Came by, and by the time I had sniffed it and had the reaction, like, I wasn't even listening. I never had that apprehension of just putting a drug up my nose. Like, oh, wait, what is this, bro? Are you sure it's this? Let me test it. I never had that apprehension. Oh, this shit's going to get me high? You said it's good? Let's do it. By the time I had snorted it, he had already started to say, dude, that's heroin. So, and I remember the first time I did it. And, like, people asked, like, the best way I could describe it is like if you're cold and you take that warm, soft blanket and wrap it around you, that feeling you get, that was that day. And that heroin addiction took me to a whole new level of addiction. On and off for years. I didn't care if it wasn't tied down. I was taking it. I pawned most of my wife's sentimental jewelry. I crashed 2 of her cars. I used to rent her car out for bundles of dope. I did shit that I would never do on my worst day in sobriety to my worst enemy. I did willingly because I needed money or I needed drugs. And that's that guilt and shame you talk about. I used to live in shame for a while, which kept me in that cycle of addiction. Today, I understand that, guilt is one thing, shame is another. I did bad things. It doesn't make me a bad person. But I can remember, like Kim said and Time said, I can remember literally standing in my kitchen, sniff a bag of heroin, and then start bawling, crying, and not want to be alive anymore because I was doing heroin. But then I needed to do more heroin because I was upset that I was doing heroin. Like that mindset, that thought process is so cyclical, and it's so ill. I talk about insanity. Like, no normal person that's going through a normal process thinks like an addict thinks. Um, it's hard to explain it unless you go through it. And that's why I think these programs are so important, because, Tommy, Kim, the people I've met at NJRC, the alumni people we talk to on a daily basis, they understand. That's that like-minded disease. I did, after that little issue, I did go away again, 30 days. We relocated again to my sister's house we were renting in Marlboro. Was doing well. My wife and I got married. We purchased a house in Highland, New York, where I am today. But for some reason, I was on Suboxone. I had 3 years. I don't want to say sober because I wasn't really sober. I was just kind of not using drugs because the urge wasn't there. But Suboxone did something to me that nothing else did. It numbed everything. It didn't allow me to process stuff. I knew how to tweak it so that I could every once in a while get that buzz from it. And now that I knew I had something that if I went through withdrawals, I could take, I started dabbling in heroin again. Again, I wasn't doing a program. I wasn't working on myself. I was just existing. And for no reason, life was going great. Just bought a house. I'm married. Still got the woman that I love with me. We got money. I had a job at the time. She's a nurse. Everything was great. I just decided to pick up heroin again. But this time when I picked up heroin, I also picked up crack. And that was the most insidious thing I ever did in my life. Heroin was bad, crack was worse. And then in 2021, I got a felony DWI at like 9 o'clock in the morning in a small town. I drove through a telephone pole at 60 miles per hour. My foot was still on the gas when the cops pulled me out the car. Don't know why, they talk about higher power, God, whatever it may be. The reason why I'm still here, couldn't tell you how I walked away with a fractured wrist. And I don't even think it wasn't even fractured. It was just badly bruised. That was it. I didn't have a scrape or a scratch on me. Knocked out all the power. I'm sure the kids that were in school that day, I was their hero because they got to go home from school early because there was no power in the whole town. But that, and I still couldn't admit, yeah, I might have a problem. Like, there's something seriously wrong. Got a 5-year took a plea deal for 5-year probation, felony probation. All I had to do was show up to sentencing. Decided that day to get high. I don't need to go to sentencing. So they issued a warrant, and I was on the run for a little bit. And while that warrant was issued, I was not supposed to be driving a vehicle. I wasn't supposed to be near a vehicle. Supposed to be refraining from drugs and alcohol, criminal activity, all that stuff. I took my wife's brand new vehicle that she waited, 12 months to get. It was when the new Broncos first came out. I took that, and at 11 o'clock in the morning in the city of Newburgh, crashed that, totaled that. And I was so messed up that I'm on body camera, by the way. My lawyer told me, just take the plea deal. I'll get to that in a minute. I told the cops that I was an undercover cop and I had the scene locked down. And then proceeded to give them my cousin's name, who was a cop in the area. So they all knew him. So they knew I was full of shit. My wife said that hours later when she came to pick me up at the state trooper barracks, I was so gone, I didn't even make sense. I was trying to jump out the window of the car. I was completely gone. Came home, woke up the next day like nothing happened, left to go get drugs. Now this is during like the height of COVID. My wife was traveling, and she was traveling in Newark, New Jersey at Beth Israel Hospital. And unbeknownst to me, she had been talking to people. She was trying to find a place to get me into outside of New York State because I had done every rehab in New York and it didn't work. So she came home one day and she basically, for the first time in my life, gave me an ultimatum. I was no longer, at this point in time, I wasn't a spouse or a partner or a functional member of society. I was like what I like to describe a squatter in my wife's house. That's what I was. I wasn't even a roommate because I wasn't even contributing financially. I was a squatter who came and went, as he pleased. I held my wife hostage for years in this house because of my addiction. And she came home one day and said, I love you, but I'm not going to watch you kill yourself. There's a bed in South Amboy, New Jersey at Recovery Centers of America. You have to be in there by Friday or you have to go. Like, you can't be here. Like, you can go to the rehab or you can get out, but you can't be here. So now for the first time in my life, one of my biggest fears is I might be homeless, because at this time, all my friends, my family, they had written me off. I was done. I was dead to them. I became a liability. They didn't want nothing to do with me. So I chose to go. And like you said, Tommy, I'm going to do this 28-day program and I'll come home. My wife had already been in contact with the woman that was going to be my therapist and said, he's going to sound great. He's going to say everything right. He's done this so many times. He's very intelligent. It's all bullshit. He can't come home. He cannot come home until I need time. So about 2 weeks in, I was notified, yeah, you can't go home. Your wife doesn't want you home. So you might want to complete this program. And then we have a program we want you to check out in North Jersey. And that ended up being NJRC. I took the virtual tour and it was a mansion. It was beautiful. And I was like, well, I mean, fuck it. I don't want to go, but if I can't go home, why not go live here? It's free. My insurance is going to pay for it. So, and that slowly started my process of giving myself enough time and changing my mindset. I was able to get some perspective. And there was still that thing in the back of my head. I didn't want to go home either because I had some serious legal issues to deal with. So I did the PHP program at NJRC. I transitioned to the K2 house. I lived there for 6 months and I graduated from NJRC August 8th of 2022. I came home and August 31st of 2022, I was in jail. When I turned myself in, they remanded me no bail because they considered me going out of state for therapy, going on the run. Granted, I did it for the right reason and they were happy for me for being, getting help, but law's the law. And because it was a post conviction case, because I had not shown up for sentencing on the first one, New York state law is on a post conviction, bail's not eligible. So they remanded me and I ended up getting sentenced to basically 1 to 3 years in state prison. I got denied my first attempt at parole because I was a menace to society. That was essentially what, they used bigger words than that, but that's essentially what it breaks down to. And then I qualified for Shock. Shock is a military boot camp prison in West New York. Actually, I believe it's up by Kim. And I did the program essentially because it got me home, I think, 11 months sooner than if I would have stayed in prison. And I'm very thankful that I did it because it gave me discipline, it gave me routine, and I talk about, I don't recommend people going to prison to get where I am today in life. It's not the choice. It's not like I would say, yep, you got to go to prison if you really want to get sobriety. No, that's not. It was my experience, and I think it had to happen for me because all the little things I took for granted when I was using, like going for a walk with my wife, going grocery shopping, using the bathroom when I want to use the bathroom, that's all taken away when you go to prison. So it gave me perspective, and then it also gave me more time away from the chaos. However, if I didn't have sobriety before I went to prison, I don't think I would have came home in the mindset that I came home in. You know, there's a lot of chaos to my story. I struggled with addiction for a long time, and I've had clean time in the past. I think the difference this time is I came home in March of 2024, and in 2 years, I've held a job. I've got promoted through that job. I'm now a manager at that job. I have money in my bank account. I helped get my sister sober. My mom is in my life. My niece and nephew, I'm one of their favorite people. I'm a good husband again. My wife is, I mean, that's my best friend. That's my rock. She stuck with me through everything. And, we have a better relationship today than we've had in 16 years. And that's all because I do this every day. I didn't get to a year and was like, I'm good. I don't have to do this anymore. I do this every day because I understand now that I take one day off and that could be the day that ends my life. You know, um, I share my story. This podcast, Tommy, I'm so grateful that you're the brains behind it, and the IT guy. I'm not computer savvy, so but the willingness and the selflessness that you show on a daily basis, not just here, but even in our alumni, consistently reaching out. And I aspire to be like that. That inspires me to every day. You know what? Tommy's doing it. Kim's doing it. I'm gonna do it. And that's that positive reinforcement, that positive energy. We feed off each other. And that's why I think, it's so important to get a network. Something I never did in all my other times of using. I didn't network. I didn't go and meet people like minded. I always thought, oh, this is boring. I would hear the old people talk about all the things they got in recovery. And I'm like, this dude's out of his mind, bro. There's no way that's going to happen. It's happened. I'm a twice convicted felon who's a manager at a resort now, making good money. I got my family back. There's things that I want back that haven't come back yet because of my actions in the past, like a driver's license and certain things. But that stuff can come when it comes. Today I'm sober. I have my health. I started gaining respect back. My word means something. When I say I'm going to do something, I do something now, and people depend on me. And I only got all that stuff because I'm in recovery. And to me, there's a difference of being clean and being sober. Sober for me is a lifestyle. It's a way of living, and I try to better every aspect of my life on a daily basis, whether it's my emotions, my anger, my patience. That's a tough one. But I also ask for help, or I lean on people when I know, hey, I need this, or hey, what do you think about this? I can lean on that. I'm not afraid to ask for it. I'm not afraid to bounce it off of people. And service is huge for me. You know, I don't think I'd have anything that I have right now. I'd most likely be dead if I didn't understand and actually this time work on myself and understand that I have to do this every single day. Um, I was never diagnosed mentally ill, but I don't know any sane person that has done the things that I've done. So somewhere along the line, you know, the drugs might have made me a little crazy. And I deal with that on a daily basis. I'm able to have thoughts today and almost 4.5 years sober. Yeah, sure. Do I think about it once in a while? Yeah. Does that thought pop in my head? Yes. But I have tools now to understand that that's just a thought. I don't have to act on that thought anymore. I can change that thought before it becomes an obsession and use my tools to get through it, bounce it off of someone, and move on throughout the day. I don't have to pick up. I don't have to use drugs. At the end of the day, when all else fails, someone very, very who I look up to very much, Justin, like he said, no matter what, there's nothing in this world that can get me to use drugs. And as long as I don't pick up today, no matter what else goes on throughout the day, as long as I don't pick up today, I win. And then tomorrow is tomorrow. I'll deal with that when that comes. So, I'm grateful for the people that I've met in recovery, especially Kim, Tommy. I'm grateful for this platform. It is very important to me. I think it's why we are still here. It's a big part of it. And if it saves one person, then, that's a miracle in itself. So thanks for letting me share. And I'm looking forward to more shares.
Thank you, Johnny. I know you have to go, and sorry for keeping you so long, but I really appreciated your share. Kim, again, thank you. In closing, I just want to tell everyone, we had this episode just to validate that we are not counselors. We are actually addicts. And, if you're out there suffering, your story's not over yet. Your addiction doesn't define you. What was in the past is in the past, and that's where it should stay. And today, you can change your life. We changed our lives, and it's not going to be an easy road. But the thing is, as long as you're willing to take that one step, first it's admitting that you have a problem and accepting that you have a problem. I'm an addict today. I was an addict last week. I was an addict 50 years ago, and I'll be an addict for the rest of my life, and I'm okay with that. Do I have to use drugs? No, no, I don't. Um, and we all, our stories might be same. I mean, it might not be the same, but our feelings are pretty much the same. That feeling of being inadequate, not fitting in, and so forth. I don't know if you heard it through Kim's story and Johnny's story and my story, but there usually becomes a time where you know what, you have to start working on yourself. It's always that battle. Putting the drugs down is going to be hard enough, but the real battle is dealing with that person you see in the mirror. And that's what we do every single day. We try to become a better person today than we were yesterday. And every time we take that approach, that's when we heal ourselves and give the opportunity to heal somebody else. So, in closing, I don't know if you guys want to say something. I just want to just tell any addict that's out there, if you're suffering, tune into our Interfix channel on TikTok, tune into our Interfix channel here on YouTube, and we love you. We're there for you. Join us. Leave a comment in the comment section if you enjoyed what we shared today. Not every episode is going to be about that. Sometimes we're just going to be talking about topics of mental health, or just for today, or just experiences. And hopefully, we'll get some professionals on here, like mental health doctors and therapists and so forth, to discuss this road of addiction and mental health. And with that being said, I'm going to end this episode again, saying that I love you, I respect you. Your story's not over. Kim, do you want to say something in closing?
Yes, just if you're struggling, please reach out for help. There is a solution, and we are here for you. So please, please, if you're struggling, reach out. Thank you.
Johnny?
Yeah, I can only echo what you and Tim said. It is a struggle. And the most important thing is you're not alone. You don't have to do it alone. Alone we
That's
suffer,
right.
together we recover. And I know I'm not sitting here today because I did it on my own. Um,
Right.
no matter what you've done in your past, you can undo it. I promise you, your family still loves you, your loved ones still love you, and there's people out there that will start to love you until you can love yourself again. So what you got to do is
Exactly. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. And just one last thing I want to say is that, listen, addiction is going to talk to you in your own voice and try to convince you that, you don't have to recover. You don't have to live. You can just exist. But recovery will talk to you by faith. And if you have faith uh, in NA or AA or just even the inner fix, we're here to help. And with that, we'll see you next week. God bless. Take care.